Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Cafe Muse. Happy November. Thank you, Michael Davis, for your beautiful classical guitar performance, and Henry for the lovely slideshow. I'm Ellen Cole, and I'm hosting tonight along with our guest co-host, Susan Oakey. Our tech director for this evening is Luther Jett, working his magic behind the scenes. We're proud that Cafe Muse is now in its 24th year of literary programs. Our featured poets tonight are Marianne Boruch and Katherine J. Williams. Susan will introduce Marianne, and I'll introduce Katherine. We encourage you to buy our featured authors' books tonight and to donate to Cafe Muse to support our literary programs. You can find the links for buying our books and for making a donation in our chat. You may notice audience members have been muted. This will help prevent feedback problems for our readers and ensure uninterrupted programming. Please bear with us if we do encounter a technical glitch. During the reading, you may use the chat to comment or to ask a question that our readers may answer during the Q&A period, moderated by WordWorks' Karen Alanier, if time permits. Our program is scheduled for 1 hour. You won't want to miss our next Cafe Muse reading, which will take place on Monday, December 5th at 7:15 p.m. and will feature poets published in the anthology I Wanna Be Loved by You, Poems on Marilyn Monroe. The program will be emceed by the anthology's editor, Susanna Case. Now, here is Susan Oakey, who will introduce this evening's first reader, the distinguished poet, Marianne Boruch.
Thank you, Ellen, and welcome everybody. I had the privilege of working with poet Marianne Boruch for a semester during my time at the MFA program at Warren Wilson College. I'll never forget the advice she gave me on how to keep on growing as a poet. She said, "Keep seeking out new experiences. Put yourself in unfamiliar situations." For Boruch, that meant joining the medical students one semester at Purdue University, where she taught, to gain the experience of dissecting a human body, a project that led to her 2014 collection, Cadavers Speak. It meant learning to recognize birds by their songs, learning to draw, teaching students in Taiwan, China, serving as an artist in residence in Denali National Park, becoming a visiting professor on a Fulbright grant at the University of Edinburgh a decade ago, and in 2019, it meant a 6-month stay in Australia as a Fulbright senior scholar. She wanted to see and learn about the weird, unique animals and birds on that continent, about its forests and reefs, the indigenous culture and its traditions, the local poetry scene. Boruch and her husband volunteered at a wild animal rescue center where they bottle-fed baby kangaroos, known as joeys, whose mothers had been killed by cars. They visited natural history museums, drove into the wild to look for platypuses, lyrebirds, and emus, even interviewed a taxidermist who specialized in stuffing birds. Boruch made friends with a posse of local poets who liked to draw, converse, and drink coffee. Then, as soon as she left the country in July, preparing to write her poems back in the States, Australia was hit by a season of unprecedented apocalyptic wildfires. The fire's devastation transformed and expanded her thinking about the project. I would get emails from friends who were sleeping in gas masks because of the smoke, she told me, as well as other accounts from poets and friends who were out rescuing wild animals from the flames. Boruch decided to choose as her model Pliny the Elder, the ancient Roman military commander and naturalist who witnessed and wrote about the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. He died after exposure to its dangerous gases while trying to rescue a friend. The first line of Bestiary Dark, her astonishing collection about Australia, is the question Pliny himself asked. The world, is it finite? It's a question that preoccupies all of us in this era of climate change, as we read of entire countries disappearing underwater, while others dry up and turn from farmland into desert. From an Indigenous elder in Canberra, Boruch learned about Indigenous beliefs concerning the relationships between the native people and the natural world, and grappled with questions about how best to write about what she'd seen and experienced. Besides the elder's wisdom and a panoply of Australia's birds, animals, and sea life, Bestiary Dark features appearances by a bossy archangel drawn from Boruch's Catholic girlhood, and her imagined post-mortem conversations with an emu, a huge flightless bird whose death by motor car she witnessed on a road in the outback. She will read for us tonight from Bestiary Dark, and she may also read some new work. Marianne Boruch is a professor emerita at Purdue University. She has published 12 poetry collections, 3 books of essays with a 4th forthcoming, 1 memoir and another in the works. Her honors and her other publications are too many to name. She is the most curious, fearless, and inventive writer I have ever met. Please welcome poet Marianne Boruch.
Okay, I want to thank Susan for that. It was really lovely introduction, and everyone should know that Susan's a wonderful poet, so you can tell how she put that together. And I want to thank Cafe Muse for this invitation to come and read, and Henry and Karen, Ellen, Luther, everyone who has been involved with this. And of course, I just want to say it's a great honor to be reading with Katherine Williams tonight. Well, I was going to sort of give some context to these poems, but Susan, you really helped me. You laid the groundwork here. I did go to Australia. My husband and I did volunteer at a vast nature reserve called Tinbinbilla near Canberra, where we were living. And we did volunteer also at, the wildlife care centers that dealt with the poor Joeys who were orphaned by their mothers getting hit by cars, which happens quite a bit in Australia. The fires hit when we came back, and when I began in earnest to really write the book. And anyway, so the book survives. I want to say that just a couple of things. Roo is short for kangaroo. A pinky is a newborn hairless kangaroo. The Flinders is a mountain range in the Australian outback. That snarky archangel kept coming into the poems no matter what I did to keep him out. Pliny the Elder was a model and somewhat for this book. He was our first natural historian in the West. His Historia Naturalis is 13 volumes long and is completely bonkers. Everyone should read it. It's wonderful. I also want to point out this. I'm holding up the book. I was told to hold up the book, and I want you to special note here for the cover, which is by a really brilliant Australian part Indigenous artist and poet, Judith Negalia Crispin, who, and you should Google her, she's fantastic. And she allowed us to use this cover very kindly. And these are 3 panels from a 5-panel photo painting that she did. And the title alone is wonderful. 4 birds and a lizard return to their ancestors on spider strings over Mount Kuora in Kabi Kabi country. And you can see these figures are taking flight. These are roadkill photos. These creatures are brought back to life because of Judith. And I always think of it as they're somehow in the Buddhist bardo between, between Earth and the afterlife. They're hanging around there. They're between what is now and what comes next. Anyway, I'm going to read straight on and not without comment between poems. I'll just pause a bit. So, okay, here we go. A prologue. The world, is it finite? Began Pliny the Elder on what he saw and heard, 37 books to round that up, first century CE, as he proceeded to be infinite. His Naturalis, his Historia, book 8 unto 10, land life and sea life through the air and underground life, same as now, only ancient. The one thing Pliny never imagined, he'd be ancient. We watch the cassowary go famously scary beside an ordinary house in Queensland. A Tasmanian devil road leap on cue at dusk, Carmen on the radio west of Hobart, the lyric opera all the way from Chicago to that end of the earth. When you see a platypus love his mud as he does, what happens? Or while the echidna slips into grass as into a pocket, and kangaroos, wallabies lying down to their regal so what as brilliant birds span out overhead without number. You think this world doesn't know things? I asked the fires from a distance. Do you think you can do any damn thing you want? Like asking a mad, bad baby to fix cars, or not eat pablum, or be a sweet, polite cry in the night. I could redact most parts of me so memory can't even reach them. I could, and really, once in Tasmania, it was, you guys, nearly off the map, our son wrote, half mistaken, amazed as old cartographers in love with vast, with a lot of water around something. Most didn't much leave their rooms. Any nearly equals beginning. Leave it to a map to unmap. O cloud of close your eyes. Hang on, said the sweet, earnest boy, secretly writing his novel, selling us a printer at Office Works in Canberra to over and over, the way myth works, any real story come along. Real story, a fire about to be triggered by ghost gums and lightning, or floods that overwhelm, or such beautiful days. I understand, I said to the Indigenous elder. No, you don't, he said. The quiet, the way a kangaroo stopped, stared at me, its little T-Rex arms frozen for how many minutes? What I mean is, I don't know what I mean. In an elevator, the body aches for gravity as that smallest room of the house rises like some weird high-handed helium's in charge of armies and ships, childhood, history, futures, next day to next, major exports and imports of whatever time, place, race, gender we get, jolts to a stop. Look down while you're up there, alley and meadow, the town dump, crazy winged with gulls, minor royalty in the kingdom of old mattresses, busted toys, and shopping carts, no matter how inland. But everywhere is inland when you know how far the sea drops dark at the edge of things. Sea as idea, as original vague rumor of blue some stranger had of water in the year of great fires. Which year and whose year and how many years? He walked away into a little dot and spoke like a prophet. I saw a mob of those dots on the horizon most mornings. Kangaroos, joeys, more kangaroos. I lifted my binoculars. I see them too, big shot. an archangel said in passing. Dear thus and so, dear eventually, all of us lose the gene could, trading it off for can't and sleep alone, like the pelican in the vast reserve lost his long-term mate to bored ducks in a bad mood, marauding in pond 4. Their revenge for who knows what, just to wear her out, or it was fun, or it was time, called Mildred and too old. She got tired. A detail about him, one wing gone after and also. So he's stuck there solo in paradise, given a human name too, George, in dubious compensation. A king reigning over waterfowl with a history. What I could not see, but did, was another pelican, one on Derry Road, dipping down to swallow a whole fish whole. Noon glare, long pinkish throat lit up to X-ray, live shadow shape, ricocheted in there, down, bestiary of mind, unnerve. So we get there just as some asshole, forgive me, on a joyride in the outback runs her down the emu and keeps going. After all, he's got a planet to desecrate. A very long line of feathered bloody something. She's lifting now and falling back to the road, not exactly an ostrich, but as lordly and slower each time. Don't fool yourself. It wasn't wind, not a broken hinge crying out to open a door. Our worthless offerings. Oh, emu, here's our numb speechlessness. But there are those who drive who cares if I kill and never regret. We willed that news to her, medieval as prayer, all abruptly stricken in the flinders. The hand-wringing two of us, as another acolyte stepped from his truck with a huge plumber's wrench to bash her kindly a good 1, 2, 3, her, oh, each time fainter, oh, on a loop. Reader, you who think poems should never story too much or render news of the day, I need to get this right. Grief is human speak for emu. Night's quiet since then. Of course, Pliny got here first with this bestiary thing. World turned CE 2 years pre-Pompeii, is recollecting every blur and fine point. It's how you watch birds from a blind. You see and they don't. The pond shrunk by drought. Is the poem a telescope or a microscope? Is it big to make small or small to make big? How much water in a poem divided by how much thirst? How much fire and ash? A time machine can cherish or destroy, and that rib toward a future. Was it a fuse? Orphaned wallaroo in my arms, a kind of baby kangaroo, not really. One species here, one species there, but they resemble. Add it in that slough of despond called room, called rescue center. The little wallaroo I bottle fed, filling in his stare as pensive as stop eating a moment. I see it, I saw it, I do. Surely his, where is she? Headlight blinded at dusk, fooled by glare, crossing for grass and a small welling up what once was a pond. The driver, Jesus, where the hell bent for a shiny can rolling near the brake? Bottle half the length of my hand in my hand. his paws and giant legs all akimbo in the flannel pouch, his human eyes, not quite fear, but warm at that speed, meant milk mixed from a tin, the bottle with its long tawny nipple, his mouth frantic as any infant's for it. Those makers of the bird book I loved must be gods. I wanted to tell the indigenous elder before he went home to his bad back, his yogurt, his brilliant insistence on who was, who wasn't in the dream time. Not that it's getting handed on, he said half to himself. Not to me, such secrets. No way. It's his worry and reverence I still look through for cockatoos and galahs flattened to vivid 2D in that book, ravens next to fairy wrens done up in gloss and detail. I lose myself to beauty, what lives in air, flashes red and yellow and frozen ink, which will never unfreeze. It's not that I don't know the difference, not like the painted ones in the book don't love their perfection or will ever understand the wind-worn real ones that hunt and get hunted to doom beyond these pages. A mirror looms up after all. To reverse a face, we'll never know what we really look like. That bird stood on a branch like this at water's edge and flew at an angle up or down. We will ask and think the book knows bigger than life pretty much, sure, the way shallow knows profound in spite of itself. I swear these birds were once each god who made this book will say, howbeit sad and at some stricken point, to take back what seemed promised forever. So you're remembering sheep now too, the archangel came into my dream last night to bug me. Domesticated creatures gone wild. What's it to you? I cheekied back. All the roaming feral ones, cattle, goats, brumbies, intrusives too, like rabbits. No camels either, I said. Nope, never spotted a single camel or rabbit out there. But each of what I saw slowed, stick skinny sleepwalkers crossing roads out of habit to water as if a small blue waited suspended in drought, whether real or not. Dry as a bone, these rivers, we cliched together and drank our swill like the old men we'd never be, sit around repeating themselves. The river dust unto dust, the river need not apply, river no rain for 8 months and counting. Every outback spot you look, a once river, an unriver. I'm reading a book on this, I blurted out to the elder. Sure you are, he said. I told him, see the boxes I checked? X, pretty much agree. X, most sick at heart agree. Spirits released by fire and fear, freed of their bodies to rise from ash and soot, where they stopped, dropped, or were caught by the burning groves, koalas and kangaroos, ancient orders of wallabies, skinks and lizards, the hidden wealth of nowhere else, cherished mammals and reptiles, the perennial question mark of platypus, so weirdly bits of both plus bird. As for the solitary wallaroos, they too out of their flesh and blood in some kind of between world, not like a dream or a bardo, not like anything I could humanly tell you. But their shapes must be gauzy and strange, a thought, really a second thought, circling the charred, toothy sticks that used to be trees, circling slow the way medieval artisans took their time to cut into wood and ink up for their bestiaries, liking to monster them a little, add an extra leg or head to those creatures, yet another scare to the other grim wonders of their time and time again. The hand goes looser and rogue, drawing a thing never seen, though the claims were real enough, gone whimsical, cartoonish to us, who demand exactitude, and always how many left on the planet, and why, oh, why is that? Our why falls from the sky in embers to spot fire any grassy place close, is lightning that strikes from smoke disguised as clouds over the no-rain bush, or the city making its own weather, is eucalyptus oil in the leaves sparking the next tree to tree to tree, or its secret and lethal as air equals gas, our carbon, our fault toward the long gone. A poet in Canberra emails, the poems should indeed be dark. So many animals. At least 3 billion into ash and charred bone, or who am I and where, numbed hectare on hectare of blackened gum tree leaves, ruined waterways. I despair. The last sentence as she slipped off screen. Then to find it from the old French, despere, he added de, an emphatic reversal of spere, to hope, despair. The word has a history, and I'm wrong. No afterlife in it. Emu, you woke up. I did, or I do, or I am, or I almost. What about those 2 hand wringers who dragged you off the road? The Americans? I heard the numb knot in their heads trying to untie itself. Emu, what about that killer savior of the heaviest wrench, stopping his truck, smashing you to grit and godforsaken once, twice, 3 times to his, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. That bastard of love, my inner eyelid, the second one that opened sideways. I lay there and saw what I saw. And the murderous driver, all exhaust and cutthroat fumes be his. Where are you now, Emu? Exactly where you are, in the italics. Thank you.
Marianne, that was fabulous.
Thank you.
I want to write a poem to an emu immediately.
The emu will love it.
Good. Anyway, thank you so much for sharing your poems with us. I'm going to introduce our next poet, Katherine J. Williams. One of the great pleasures of doing this job is introducing poets you love. And I'm especially delighted to introduce Katherine, who I've known since the beginning of my own poetry journey 20 years ago. Katherine and I spent many years studying together in Rose Solari's workshops at the Writers' Center. It didn't take me long to recognize Katherine's great talent, her gentle and astute personality, her exquisite ability to recreate the fine details of the world around her, and her finely tuned ability to recognize and communicate emotion. All those attributes are on brilliant display in her new book, her just out debut collection, Still Life, published by Cherry Grove Collections. Katherine is an art therapist and a clinical therapist who is director of the art therapy program at George Washington University and is now associate professor emerita. Her professional articles have been published in the American Journal of Art Therapy and Art Therapy. She's an artist herself, a painter whose powerful and beautiful works lean toward the abstract, and a collagist who creates delicate three-dimensional pieces that powerfully pull together scraps of handwriting, stray marks, surprising objects, and scraps of old paintings to reveal unexpected connections, the same way her poetry does. Katherine's poems have been published widely in journals and anthologies, including Poet Lore, the Northern Virginia Review, the Broadkill Review, Passager, Entelechy International, Psaltery and Lyre, the Delmarva Review, the Poets Cookbook, edited by our own Maryland Poet Laureate Grace Cavalieri, the Widow's Handbook, and How to Love the World, Poems of Gratitude and Hope. Katherine's book, Still Life, is a collection of pristine poems, the arc of a woman's life, not presented in chronological order, but in a way that allows us to piece together a powerful awareness of how a person can survive shattering trauma and still grow toward the light. She recounts how in her early childhood, her mother disappeared in an ambulance and came back months later, unable to walk or move the lower half of her body. Told in the sensual language of a child's world, light and sound, smell and touch. Here is a poet who observes every detail with a painter's eye. In another section, she relives her husband's sudden death, the terrible loneliness that followed and exists still in her elder years. And she tells us about the plant that flowers in a pile of dead leaves, the tiny newborn granddaughter whose lungs expand like wings. Katherine's passionate love for the natural world shines in every poem, is both metaphor and touchstone. In her poem, If Loneliness Were a Territory, she says, one could wander the land with a fellow explorer, search the underbrush, and sitting apart on the same smooth rock, watch tongues of light lick the water after a storm. In another poem, Evening on Bar Hill, she likens the way the roots of every aspen connect this fragile world to sorrow that ties us to each other, wears our edges smooth, and over, washes the world, leaving us rinsed and clean. And now, my friends, I'm honored to present to you poet Katherine Williams and her extraordinary poems.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Marianne, for those remarkable poems. And thanks to everyone at Cafe Muse for inviting me. And a special thank you to my friend, Lois Eby, whose gorgeous artwork, a detail from one of her gorgeous triptychs, is on the cover of the book, Still Life. So Ellen has very nicely filled in a lot of the background, so I think I could just start reading. as she said, the book is not in chronological order, so it starts with the death, a sudden death of my husband, but then goes back to childhood and then middle age and then old age. So, the idea of skin. At the hospital, after I gave permission to cut off his ring, they handed me a ragged split thing I finger in my pocket until the day I wonder why I spared his skin instead of the smooth, cold ring, as though the idea of his body died a slower death than he and was still wrapped around me. Time and ashes shattered, I glimpse myself against the rain in a dark window, feel my body raw, as if a protective film I never knew I wore is peeled to expose the veins beneath. In the harsh light inside the store, I stroke piles of purple eggplants, envying the taut skin that protects the creamy flesh within. Still life. And in this poem, I refer to a 16th century Spanish artist, Zurbarán, who paints religious paintings, but then also these wonderful little still lifes of lemons or a cup or a plate that are reminders of the preciousness of life and also how short the life in this realm is. Still life. Most mornings, I don't see the pillow still fresh from yesterday's making. On a night when the air is a thicket of heat, I search for the cool pool of sheet on the other side of the bed. In this new economy, the currency is initiative. I set the table for 7, specialize in the anthropology of 3. I'm an accidental citizen of a country where things stay put, where I sleep when tired. In the old dispensation, travel meant time to be a tourist in each other's bodies, foreign land as background. Now I practice being a lover to the world, tracing the shoulders of a new city, tasting its breath. But tonight, my house guest calls his wife. Late, laundry, tarmac, the words like the cups and petals in his Zurbarán painting, intimate reminders of a larger, fleeting life. Because of the other. After seeing, I wrote this after seeing Sean Scully's paintings at the Phillips Collection here in DC. And he gave a lecture in which he talked about not having a plan for the whole painting, but he paints one rectangle of color, and then that determines what the next rectangle of color will be. And one of those paintings is called Because of the Other. And that's the name of this poem. In the night, a poem came, lulling me to sleep before I wrote it down. Now, in the morning, rough edges emerge, pieces not fitting together, raw plates of grief sliding back beneath each other. What I wanted to say, did I want to say it? Is that the person I became out of annoyance and frustration and love, the one who made sure the bills were paid, worked the extra job so he could study healing rituals in Africa, lay on the floor one night in Vermont, holding the dog from sheer loneliness, stood beside him in the lingering light of the community garden, smelling the sweet day's work on his skin, sharing coffee from the same cracked cup while playing water from the split hose over his nubile lettuces, watched beside him in slowly unfurling astonishment at the blossoming of our daughters, curled into the warm hollow of his body for 30 years of grateful nights. What I wanted to ask, did I want to ask it, was, can this person ever become what she never was because of the other? So this one is back to childhood, and it's about my mother. Slicing the orange. Legs dangling from the table, I watch the swift arc of my mother's wrist as she slices an orange, juice dripping to the bowl beneath, ribbon of peel sliding to the table, golden sections slipping onto the growing mound of fruit. She drops a sliver into my waiting mouth, reaches for another orange. As the bright flavor shines across my tongue, I don't imagine the knife that will slip the silent tumor from her spine a few days from now. I don't yet know that lumpy packages will arrive from Haverstraw, a name so foreign there's no translation. I haven't seen the stamped leather purses or the awkward clay cups for my dolls, fruits of the will to master her hands once more. And on this day, I have not yet watched her wheel back to this table, prop her elbows for leverage, take up the knife and the orange, and slowly release the flesh from the membrane as the winding sheet of skin drops away. And this is one my father taught at a college, and we would sometimes go walking after dinner across the campus through the orchard into a little woods that the college owned. Evensong. When the blue shadow of the elm edges across the lawn, we head to the woods, my hand in the hard, smoky hand above me. Sounds of students slide away as we pass the campus, and the hush dusk drapes around us, thick and cool. The last of the day's wasps lazily rise from smashed apples that sink in the ground as the swish of grasshoppers through high grass gives way to crickets easing under evening, calling for a mate. Our way grazed down to feeling muzzy light furs. The edges were lured by the dark that is not dark, by the scent of decay, the sense of a path, the loud hush of high trees crowded together. I am thinking of the unseen snails curled in their coiled beds, squirrels snuggled in leafy drays above us. I don't think of what my father is thinking in this silence that is not silence. He and I will turn with the woods at our back like wind, pass through pool upon pool of streetlight across the campus into the house where my mother sleeps in her high invalid's bed. He will tuck me in, leave on one light. Out on the porch, the smoke from his cigarette will curl around his yellowed fingers as peepers throb in the faded elms. The orchard has not yet been raised to make space for new buildings. His lungs still fill with the moist night air. And this is a poem sort of in the middle of my life. It's based on an overheard remark. And the remark was, the day after my grandfather died, my grandmother ate mushrooms for the first time in 60 years. And so this is called Choices. Did she forage in the understory on pearly summer mornings, the bright orange crenellations spelling chanterelles, each year's growth springing up untouched for the man who refused to taste, smell, or touch a mushroom? Did she dream of morels, tiny colonies of fragrant cells bubbling in butter while her body lay cupped inside his in that long marriage of sleep? Did she awaken in the hollow of the night, following the liminal smell of porcini floating in broth, only to slowly sense his sleeping body, the sweet scent of him in the dark? Would she perhaps, while he was far in the fields, turn to the unstained pages of cookbooks, the pristine sections lying flat between the rippled recipes for seasons of puddings and roasts? On the morning after the first night she'd slept alone in 60 years, did she rise early, pull her boots over stiff ankles, take herself to the harsh chill of the store, to finger musty piles of cremones, umbrellas of portobellos, little moons of common mushrooms, the memory of earth on her hands? And the last are a section of poems from much later in life. And this poem it's based on ghost pipes, those little tiny white plants that spring up in the bottom of the floor of the forest, I guess is what you'd say. And you never know when they're going to come up. And they're white because they have no chlorophyll. And so this is ostensibly about that, but it's also about seeking. Ghost pipes. I never know how far in I need to go before the starling's clatter pales, the rattle of the high grass turns to breath, and a loud hush of presence surrounds me. But now, under the clear story of forest, it happens as slices of light slip through the high gray beach. Even though I don't expect to see them, the fringe of my sight is always attuned, as though merely watching opens the nave of possibility. This morning, off to the left beneath the beach, in a ring, sepulchral, glowing, the ghost pipe's bright absence of any bit of green. On all the yesterdays I walked through this forest, these icy plants were only an idea. And if I tried to bring a stem home, the fluted blossoms would blacken in my hands. Belief lifted off so quietly, I barely heard it leave. What does it mean to worship? All I know is that I've missed you, even if I'm creating the you I long for. Afterlife. After I didn't call 911 because I didn't want to wake the neighbors, and after I went back to sleep and didn't die, here is this morning, fresher than yesterday because I might not have seen it at all. In the street, such amplitude, an absence of movement or sound. A single crisp leaf lies on the air, though I feel no wind. This quiet is like the house when my husband would travel, each object more vivid, backlit by his sure return. No one much returns these days, lifting off as they do to other realms. Some nights I try to find a place in the street under a smudge of sky where the trees don't block the stars. But even then, the light from the street light blankets the view. Knowing stars are up there should be enough, Memory should be enough. But I'm thirsty for the actual light of stars still shining eons after their end. And this poem isn't in the book, but it looks back over the life that the book talks about. It's has an epigraph from Louise Gluck, "Someone like me doesn't escape." Arrogance. Peeking out from under our Norway spruce at the reign of siblings in a kingdom not my own, or walking with my hand on the metal arm of my mother's wheelchair while others danced ahead, it felt as though I lived in a land apart. The day my young husband died on a dingy sidewalk in New York, I recognized the territory. Someone like me doesn't escape became an answer to a riddle I didn't try to solve. The dailiness of couples, the ease of others in the world, foreign currency I couldn't spend, and a strange comfort in this recognition. But here I am at 80, still standing in a barely peopled field. How could I have thought myself especially marked? How not notice this brilliant, living loneliness? And the last poem in the book, Last Night. I always liked that monk who, while planting a hill of beans, was asked what he would do if he knew he would die that night. The one who said, "I would finish planting this row of beans." Sort of like that time I took an antibiotic that made me a little crazy. And I woke in the middle of the night thinking, this must be it. I'm dying. I'll put in a load of wash so my girls won't have to do it when they come. But now that I'm closer to dying, I'm wondering what I would do if I knew I would die tonight. It would be too late to take a trip, which, although Venice was alluring and I wouldn't trade sitting on the floor of the hut in the kraal in pure dark beyond the lights of Durban, watching worshipers dance their ancestors down, I don't really like. Travel itself, I mean. All that packing and worrying about losing things and losing things. But here I am wasting my time before dying, thinking of what I don't want to do. And that's a habit I'd certainly eradicate were an instant way to do that. What I would want is to say friable and know enough about rocks to name the elements that crumbled from the green chunk in my hand. Say succulent, lucullus, and broccoli without needing sentences to contain them. It's too late. And it has been for years before I knew this was the night it would all end. To apologize for the inadvertent or calculated cruelties I've wreaked on those I loved. Too late to remember secrets people told me I've since forgotten. But if there were time, I would swim naked in a cold lake at just that moment when your body disappears and your pure, weightless being. And if I could do this at night, I'd be lying on my back, becoming water, breathing stars overhead. When you do this, you only have a few minutes before you're in too long and beyond knowing that. Someone else needs to pull you out so your flesh doesn't throb with every painful beat of your heart. But as water safety books advise, you should warm up flesh to flesh. And I would definitely want flesh to flesh, especially with someone I've known through most of the ages we've lived, so that as we hold each other, we're feeling the memory of the creamy flesh of youth beneath the final folding tissue of this skin.
Catherine. That was so beautiful. Yeah, I'm so happy that you were able to give us that lovely reading of these poems I love. Thank you. Now, I think we have just enough time for our brief Q&A session. So I'm going to turn the mic over to WordWorks' Karen Alanier to ask a few questions.
Okay. I was really interested in the voices that were put forth in these poems. And I wonder, Marianne, if you'll unmute yourself, if you could talk a little bit about your theater of poetry and how that is different from like poetry of description or poetry of just pure lyricism.
Well, it's interesting you say theater because I was a writer in residence at Colby College for a spring term, last spring term, and I I taught one class, and my class was were 12 students who took Bestiary Dark, that book, and rewrote it as a black box theater production.
Wow.
Fantastic, fantastic.
And it completely changed it. I mean, it barely resembled the book by the end, of course, but which was the point. But that was very unnerving experience, I have to say. And I know nothing about theater, so it was very hard. But my husband was always talking me off the ledge every night. But I was really interested with. I mean, I see those poems, the poems. I feel like they're lyric, but I mean, and I'm an imagist really. But when I was writing them, I felt very haunted by the material, and when I was writing them, I really the reason I wanted to do this theater thing at Colby was just to kind of play this out. It turned out totally differently than I thought, but which is fine. But when I was writing the poems, it was like I was hearing them. It was like I did see kind of a black box stage, and people popping up in various places, like saying the poems. I mean, there is a speaker, and I identify with the speaker, but and I love the archangel, the little cheeky archangel coming in.
And then there's the emu.
And the emu, yeah, and that was a real experience. I mean, the first emu poem I read was something we actually observed, and it was really just a horrific thing to see. And but I felt like the more and more the emu became sort of the heart of the book, the conscience of the book, and so the fact that the emu kept returning, and there's 3 or 4, I've forgotten now, emu poems. So they're sprung on the book. But when I wrote the cadaver book that Susan Oki referred to, we dissected 4 bodies in that. I mean, not we. I mean, I was there the whole time, but I was sort of like Tom Sawyer. Like, I mean, they let me do a few things and stuff like that, but I was fascinated by one particular cadaver because it reminded me of my grandmother, and to whom I was very close. So, but that notion of, and she speaks. The name of that book is Cadaver, Speak, and she speaks, and when I had that experience writing those poems, I started writing out this. It turned out to be half the book, and the title poem. It's a long poem with like 30 some sections, but and I started in the standard way, the speaker holding forth about the poet in the cadaver lab having my little deep thoughts about everything. And I remember reading some of the first couple of ones I sent to my husband. He's like, I don't know. I'm thinking, yeah, this isn't about my experience. This is about her experience, and she gave her body to do this. And so I just changed the pronouns, I thought that was, I think, the root, the beginning of that, where I could work with a character. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Theater is always ever present when around me. I'm thinking of, because here at WordWorks we are presenting live voices, and those who come with characters, tend to populate the stage with other beings. Katherine, can you add a minute or two to the conversation?
Well, I just was struck with Marianne's saying, try not to lose the word could. Don't trade it for can't. And I think that's so much about the way that the scope of your poems, Marianne, it just seems to be captured by that, and it's very brave and exciting and quite just opening the world to us. I'm very grateful to have been able to read with you tonight.
Oh, well, I feel the same about your work, really. It was a pleasure. I love the interiority of your work.
Thanks.
I think we had a very compatible set of poems here tonight, and always wonderful to see that when that happens. And I'm going to turn the program back to Ellen, and thank you, Ellen, for hosting tonight. And I'm going to step out of the way.
Okay. And thank you, Karen, for the very interesting question. And Katherine and Marianne for your beautiful poems that both seem to talk about mortality, both of humans and of our animals, beings that share our planet. So thank you. Michael, thank you again for your music, which was lovely as always. And thanks also to Karen Alanier and the WordWorks for sponsoring Cafe Muse. Susan, thank you for co-hosting. It was wonderful to see you on this virtual stage again with us. Thanks also to Luther for his technical magic, and to my fellow co-hosts, Renee Garrity, Leah Johnson, Henry Crawford, and Majda Gama, Claire McGough, and Luther Jett. Most importantly, thanks to all of you, our wonderful audience, for being here. If you want to watch tonight's program again, it will be up on Cafe Muse's YouTube channel tomorrow, and you can extend your enjoyment by purchasing the poets' books from the links that are in the chat and telling others about the series. I hope you can join us for the next Cafe Muse program on Monday, December 5th at 7:15, featuring poets reading from their work from the I Wanna Be Loved by You poems on Marilyn Monroe, edited by Susanna Case. Please make sure you've registered on our Cafe Muse website so you receive information on the event as well as the Zoom link. Have a wonderful evening and be sure to vote tomorrow. I hope we'll see you again next month.